So all visitors must sign into the visitor book at the Kilncraigs reception. This includes council staff from other buildings. There's no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm tests today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. The council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of the Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during meetings unless with the express permission of the chair. Can members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and can all attendees mute their mics when not speaking? Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak at any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hands and I will bring you in at the appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, please indicate. Today, we will hear each of the items set out in the agenda. I will invite the officer to present the paper and then members will have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate and decision. And the clerk is going to say how many people are given apologies. We'll do a roll call.
We've only received apologies from Councillor Forson, but we have Councillor McTaggart substituting. All other members are in attendance apart from Councillor Quinn, but he may still attend.
Okay, thank you. Can any members indicate if they wish to declare an interest? No? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the minutes of the last meeting and go through those. So, page, so I'll find them 2 seconds. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11. Everybody happy with the minutes? Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the police performance report for Clip Manager April 2024 to September 2024. And Chief Inspector Katrina Thompson will present the paper, but she's accompanied by Chief Superintendent Roddy Urban.
Thanks, Chair. So, as documented on page 3 of the report, Police Scotland has actually aligned our crime groupings to the Scottish Government crime data, moving from 7 to 8 categories. So the main changes being that Group 6, our miscellaneous offences, have been split into 2 groups. So Group 6 there will now be antisocial behaviour, and Group 7 miscellaneous offences, and Group 8 now contains road traffic offences. So ultimately these changes will have an impact on the statistics and the way they are presented within the report. So for example, stalking and common assault, including assault on emergency workers, as previously categorised in Group 6, will now be categorised in Group 1. So, for example, the information and the statistics provided in the police report presented on the 18th of April 2024, you will notice a change to the 2023 figures, specifically an example of Group 1. I've also organised for the figures that you requested at the last Audit and Scrutiny Committee to be added to the report. For example, the comparison under the public confidence figures and the drink, drugs, driving offences have also been included in the statistics. If there's anything else from a statistical point of view that you want to have included, please let me know and we can make amendments for upcoming reports. Since the last Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 24th of October, we have received 5 new probationers that have started in Clackmannanshire. They started in November 2024. I've also received a transferee from another area within the division. So including the addition of 2 probationers that started in September 2024, I currently have no vacancies in our response policing. The additional officers has allowed me the opportunity to move some officers into specialist areas. So I now have my community policing teams and my alcohol and violence reduction unit at capacity. So there's no vacancies in those areas as well. They're fully resourced, which has resulted in 2 community officers per ward where there was previously vacancies. There are still times with a number of abstractions which will affect the resourcing levels, for example, absence, court citations, training, to name but a few. However, overall, the resourcing levels are at a level that allow me to direct proactive and preventative work within the area. As highlighted in the report, there has been 11 misuse of drug search warrants executed with over 25,000 worth of drugs seized and a quantity of cash, the details of which are documented on page 4 of this report. I'm also supported in Clackmannanshire by divisional resources, of which a further 3 misuse of drug search warrants were executed with the support of our divisional priority crime team, as documented on page 5 of this report. As you will note from the statistics included in the report, there has been an increase in theft by shopliftings from 212 to 222 from last year's reporting period. However, the detection rate has also increased by 15.7%, which is really positive. As mentioned on page 5 of the report, those responsible for shopliftings were targeted by my officers, and this will continue to be a priority within the area. As you may have seen in the media, a dedicated unit has been established to tackle retail crime throughout Scotland. Following a £3 million funding allocation from the Scottish Government, the Retail Crime Task Force has been created to address the rise in offences such as shopliftings. A strategy which focuses on the prevention of retail crime as well as enforcement against offenders has been developed in consultation with members of the Scottish Partnership Against Acquisitive Crime, including the Scottish Retail Consortium, Retailers Against Crime, the Scottish Grocers Federation and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, as well as Trade and Standards Scotland. The team is made up of 14 uniformed officers and detectives, as well as 4 civilian staff, including specialist analysts and an architectural liaison officer. The uniformed officers will operate within Edinburgh, Glasgow and Lanarkshire, as crime figures show that these areas experience the highest levels of retail crime. However, the team will be able to assist me and my officers in delivering prevention activities and assisting stores to protect their premises. The Task Force Architectural Liaison Officer will also be engaging with retail premises to identify ways in which they can enhance security and crime prevention measures in place and reduce incidents occurring. In addition to funding the task force, the investment from Scottish Government will be used to develop the diversionary programme aimed at reducing reoffending and youth offending, as well as focus on enforcement in relation to repeat offenders and organised crime. My weekend policing plans continue to be in place for my officers to carry out high visibility patrols in areas where there has been antisocial behaviour, carry out licensed premises checks in support of the nighttime economy to ensure members of the public are safe, and also in relation to events that are being held in the area. As mentioned in the report, there has been a number of events that my officers have supported during this reporting period, including the Alba Games, Gala Days, Tilly in the Park, Clackmannanshire Fun Day, general election and football matches to ensure attendees' safety, but it's also a great community for our community engagement. I continue to be supported by officers from national divisions, and within the report is the collaborative work that is carried out between road policing officers and my officers, and the priority route for Clackmannanshire remains the A91, and uniform officers patrol this route on a regular basis. There's also been several campaigns during the reporting period, specifically in relation to road safety, and some highlights of the road crime that has been identified and reported is also highlighted in the report. Thank you, Chair, and welcome any questions.
Thanks very much. We're now open to questions. Anyone have any questions? Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Chair. I would like some further information about the initiative that you've highlighted called That Guy. I'm just wondering how many have engaged in the Clacks area, how successful it has been, and if there's any progress and outcomes identified for that initiative. Sorry, Karen.
Thanks, Councillor. I don't have the specific statistics in relation to how many have taken part in That Guy, but I would love to be able to provide that and ask for it to be circulated to elected members. One thing we could potentially offer is for some of our specialist officers that deal with the That Guy campaign to attend at another meeting and to go through exactly the circumstances. But one thing that is mentioned is that the school-based officers do promote That Guy campaign within the schools as well, so that is definitely delivered within all our high schools. My community officers are aware of it as well, should they feel it relevant to talk in primary schools as well, but they are very much focused on high schools. and also any talks that we give at Forth Valley College as well. But in relation to specific statistics about how many people have actually taken it up, I don't have that, but I can definitely find out and get back to you.
Thanks. Got a couple of other questions, if that's okay. Just talking about the schools there, Kat. I noticed that Alloa Academy is not mentioned as having any of these initiatives that you spoke about in Lawrence Hill and Alva. Just wondered if there's any programmes happening in Alloa Academy, and if not, is there a reason for that?
So it specifically mentioned Lawrence Hill and Alva Academy in relation to the violence against women guest speakers. We haven't done that in Alloa, but it's definitely something that we can speak to the education about, whether or not that's part of the requirements, and also it comes down to time as well. Obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot of inputs that they will want to do. But there is other inputs that we do in Alloa Academy. Obviously, you're aware that we've got 2 school-based officers that cover all 3 of the academies. So although there's not been a specific violence against women talks, because the guest speakers, there has been other inputs within Alloa Academy.
Thanks. And I just wondered, on page 15 of the report, it mentions, well, it heads up a cable violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour. But there's no figures or narratives about antisocial behaviour, and we as councillors know these are reported to us, and if appropriate, we advise that contact is made with the police. Just wondered, how are these responded to, how are they recorded, and are there any follow-ups to that? Because antisocial behaviour can really adversely affect people's lives, and I just wondered why there wasn't a narrative in there about it. Thanks.
Well, thanks, councillor. So, as you're well aware, antisocial behaviour covers a multitude of different crimes, different elements. Not all of it constitutes criminality. We do work in partnership with Clackmannanshire Council on different elements in relation to noise, environmental. But in relation to antisocial behaviour specifically, if Police Scotland receive reports of antisocial behaviour, they will be contacted by someone within Police Scotland. That's not always necessarily a police officer that attends our resolution team, which is based in C3 division. So it may be a phone call to have a discussion over the phone and obtain the information, but that information is still passed to my officers to review. If we see any trends in relation to neighbourhood disputes or specific areas within Clackmannanshire, then my community policing officers will then be able to attend. We have had specifics recently in relation to antisocial behaviour, some youth disorder in Telekutu, for example. So as a result of that, we've carried out talks within the local schools to ensure that pupils understand the consequences and the impact that it does have on people. We do work with our partners in relation to diversionary elements. So just recently talking to Lorraine, Strategic Director, in respect of street soccer and whether or not we can create street soccer within Clackmannanshire area for young people. So we try and think about why there's antisocial behaviour and then work with partners to actually resolve the issue. But obviously, if there's any criminality, there needs to be a sufficiency of evidence to be able to actually charge somebody. But an investigation will always occur, and that includes door-to-door CCTV, speaking to people that perhaps have Ring doorbells, looking at trends, trying to get information. But ultimately, we need the evidence to be able to charge. But that doesn't mean that we can't do high visibility patrols in the areas, which is what we've been doing. And actually, specifically in relation to Telekutu recently, we've been doing high visibility patrols as well as plainclothes patrols to have a combination to be able to actually prevent vandalisms, for example, happening and antisocial behaviour, but actually also to identify criminality as well and actually identify those that have been responsible. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. That's it, thanks.
No questions, Councillor Point.
Thanks, Chair. Kat, good morning. On recruitment and establishment and things like that, the 5 new probationers is very good news indeed. Are these school leavers or people from an experience of life?
No, thanks, Councillor. Actually, it's a combination. So we have younger officers, but we have actually got officers that are more experienced. I think that's the best way of putting it, more experienced, all of which have gone through our recruitment phase and our training, but it's a combination, and I think that additionality, both from a numbers point of view, but from different backgrounds, different experiences, I think it really strengthens our teams and strengthens our ability to deal with members of the public, different crimes, which is it's really positive, and it allows us to be more preventative and proactive because we've got increased numbers.
And how long will it be before these probationers will hit the streets, as it were?
So that's all the officers that have actually arrived with us. So they've actually carried out their 15 weeks training prior to us. So they actually arrived in November 2024, and then we had 2 extras that arrived with us in September. That recruitment continues. So as soon as I have any vacancies, then obviously discussions with our senior leadership team about who gets the new probationers, because obviously there's a balance across Scotland and across the division. But as soon as I have any vacancies, because as you can imagine, people are continually developing to promotion, moving to different posts, secondments, things like that. So although I don't have any vacancies at the moment, I will likely have them in the future. So there'll be opportunities for more probationers to attend in Clackmannshire.
So you've no vacancies at all across the entire establishment. That's extremely good. Excellent. Fine. I wanted to just follow up on Councillor McTaggart's question about that guy, but that kind of engagement with school people in general. Do you have a means of sort of following up those kind of sessions, those interactive sessions, to establish if the lessons have hit home and are having any impact, other than just looking at the crime figures? There's an intermediate stage of assessing whether the kids have actually taken it on board.
It's very difficult to obviously establish whether or not they have taken on the information. The one thing that I would say is their continual engagement and some feedback from educational partners. So we do obviously the way that it's public trust and confidence with our young people as well. So the more that they can engage with my police officers, not just the school-based officers, but all the officers that they come into contact with, I think is really positive. And that's one element that I do think that highlights how well the inputs from our school-based officers actually land with the young people. I think it's very difficult, other than statistics, and as well as in the future, whether or not that makes a difference. I think it is quite hard to actually establish how an input from that guy, or from violence against women and girls, or in relation to drug inputs or violence or anything like that. It's really difficult to actually put into context about how that has landed and whether or not it's been the input or not, other than the continual engagement with police officers, which is positive.
And finally, I think, are traffic not under your control? They're separate. Having established that, do you have any influence on how they spend their 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, as it were? Because you never see them in the streets around here. At least I never seen that. Maybe a good thing. But it may be a bad thing as well, for obvious reasons. That if they're not being looked on, people are likely to be more adventurous in their motoring, shall we say.
No, thanks, Councillor. So no, you're correct. Road policing officers do not fall under my line management. However, we've got regular contact with road policing supervisors. We have a quarterly road safety meeting, which is divisionally wide, but it's road policing senior officers that attend also. So there's discussions about where the priorities are. If I've got specific concerns, I can ask them to attend in Clackmannshire specifically. They do a lot of work on Clackmannshire Bridge from a speeding perspective, and so does our camera safety partnership colleagues as well, who also don't come under my line management. So if there is a specific request, then I can ask them to come into my area. So although they're not under my direct line management, then I absolutely can ask. But as you can see from page 13 and 14, the majority of the road crime and the road policing patrols that are there is a combination of road policing officers and my local officers as well. They work hand in hand together. Obviously, if there's a serious incident on the road, there's road policing officers that attend because they've got the specialisms. We also do secondments with my officers to road policing to share that expertise, so that my officers can then understand a bit more about road safety, and they can bring that learning back into the teams within Clackmannshire. So although they're not specifically based in the area, because they are based in Stirling, they do spend a lot of time across Clackmannanshire, and they are definitely here for serious incidents as well.
It's not, oh, yeah, please carry on.
So I also, just last week, I have a regular meeting with the Divisional Commander of Roads Policing Division. I had my latest one just last week. That allows me to, I suppose, hold them to account for what they're delivering to Forth Valley. And also the conversation is also what's Forth Valley doing to contribute to national trends. We're quite lucky in Forth Valley in that one of the roads policing hubs is within Forth Valley. So even when they're not specifically tasked, and we do have a tasking process where they can put in bids, but they have to deploy wherever they go. They have to deploy to and from Forth Valley, so they're travelling on our roads even when they're not targeting our roads, and whatever they see, they deal with. So we've got a little bit of an advantage there.
I was just going to comment on Kat's statement. It's not for me to judge or assess the effectiveness, but I would suspect that doing speed patrols on the Clackmannanshire Bridge is a good thing, but there are plenty of other places where the population density is higher, and the mischievous behaviour of small boys or young boys on unlit motorbikes at night flying around in the built-up areas. This is more of a problem, I would have thought, for the traffic police to look after. It's where the population density is, they're most likely to get injuries and things like that, rather than a couple of chaps scalping into the side of the bridge, but they can't take a corner.
No, thanks, Councillor. So a couple of points. So I suppose it comes down to speed. So that's part of the Fatal Five that's been established, that speeding is a contributing factor to fatals. So that's why Clackmannanshire Bridge, it's to do with the speed element of the bridge. They do, Camera Partnership and road policing units do speed checks in other areas of Clackmannanshire. I was just using Clackmannanshire Bridge as an example. And in relation to bikes, for example, you've mentioned in the built-up areas, we do respond to any reports, but we rely heavily on people reporting so that we know where the problems are, and that we can, and then I can then allocate resources to those areas to try and one, identify those that are responsible, but also provide education in relation to a safety aspect, but then deal with the criminality side of things as well. So we do rely heavily on people informing us about where there are issues. Obviously there are regular patrols, and as the Commander said, road policing officers are in our area driving about our streets, and so are my officers, and if they do see anything, they will be able to deal with it. But as you can imagine, they're not everywhere all of the time, so we do rely heavily on people informing us about where there are issues.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Peel?
Yes, ask about drinking in designated areas. There's only been 3 people arrested for it. I work in Shannon Hill, and there's people sitting there every single day drinking in every corner, and they seem to be let off it because the officers drive by them every day.
Still on.
Thanks. So the bylaws don't allow us, so the bylaws are actually drinking in public. It's not about having an open container in a public place. So just to clarify, I didn't quite hear exactly what you said. So are they still present in Shilling Hill in that specific corner on a regular basis? So if that is the case, what I really need, it's a bit like what I've answered to Councillor Coyne, I need people to phone in and tell me that is the case. Because generally if my police officers are passing, they're en route to something else. If I don't know there's an issue, I can't allocate officers to a specific area to deal with that antisocial behaviour or that criminality. But one of the things is we are in conversation at the moment about the bylaws and whether there's a need to change the bylaws to be specific to having an open container in a public place, rather than it being an offence to actually consume alcohol in a public place. So I'm working, or my officers are working in the moment with Clackmannanshire Council and Paul Fair, licensing officer, to actually establish whether or not there's an appetite to change the bylaws.
That's great, thanks. I'm happy to shoplift them one as well.
Okay. I probably ask this every single time, and apologies, but I know that it's going to come up later on in council papers. In terms of organised crime, I was just wondering if council have that as a priority, and obviously I know you do because you've come and presented on that at a meeting before. Is there partnership working going on between the council and the police in terms of organised crime?
Crime is so wide, but there is definitely partnership working in relation to specific elements. So we work in partnership with social work, specifically in relation from a justice perspective, but also a bit like what I've answered to Councillor Keogh and Councillor Coyne as well. We rely heavily on partners to give us information, to assist us with establishing a picture of whether or not it's organised crime or if it's specific to a different element of crime. So we do work with partners in relation to that, obtaining information. I'm not 100% sure exactly what we do with partners in Clackmannanshire Council specifically to organised crime. So I don't know if there's one of the directors that maybe be able to add, or I can bring back to the next committee about exactly the different partnership elements.
I was just thinking, like when I was previously involved in this kind of area in Glasgow, they had a multi-agency approach because there was so many different elements of the community that came together in terms of organised crime. So do you think that's something that could be? It's such a difficult area to catch. I could imagine they're very clever in terms of organised criminals and very diverse, as you say. So I'm just wondering if there would be a possibility for a multi-agency approach in the future.
I think there already is a multi-agency approach within Clackmannanshire because we work so closely with yourselves, partners across, but it's not under the heading of a partnership for organised crime. But I think organised crime features in some of the partnerships that we already have established. I'm aware that we have got a development day being planned at the moment to talk about all the partnerships and how we can respond from a community planning partnership point of view under the Alliance to actually, so it's maybe something that we can have a discussion as part of that development day just specifically about organised crime. I don't think we need another actual partnership or anything like that because I think the work already features in some of the other partnerships, but I think it could be open to discussion at the upcoming development day.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. Obviously, the paper that's later on the agenda kind of outlines the approach in terms of serious organised crime, the national work that's going on around that. Obviously, if Derek was here, he would also indicate that from a procurement aspect, there's the checklist that goes through Police Scotland, etc., for new suppliers, etc. So there's a lot of work that's going on, but we can firm up those details.
Superintendent, you want to come in?
Thanks. And serious organised crime across Forth Valley and in Clackmannanshire is something that often it's a less visible crime, and also what we're doing to tackle it can be less visible. So our priority crime team, which I mentioned, and we've got a proactive unit, they focus on serious organised crime, and the Forth Valley Detective Superintendent recently had a meeting with representatives from our National Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit from the Specialist Crime Division with the senior detectives across Forth Valley to work out how they can support us in Forth tackling serious organised crime. But I agree, we can do what we can do, but it's so much more powerful when there's partnership work in there. But I do know from what Kat's saying that there are various forums where that's been progressed, but without partnership working.
Thanks. Yeah, obviously, if organised crime is organised, it will be hard to spot. And I'm just wondering, what evidence do we have that there is a significant activity in organised crime in our area? And because, whether it's loan sharks or extortion, anything at all like that, there was extortion, not so much that. But, any of those things, what impacts do we see? Because if it's a hidden crime and the victims are unwilling to come forward, it'll be harder to spot that there are, as I said earlier, bear prints in the wood. Therefore, there are bears present. So what bear prints have you spotted in Clackmannanshire?
No, thanks, Councillor. So a number of different areas. So I spoke about retail crime. So we have organised criminals that come into the area to specifically target shops. So that's one thing that we've identified, and we've got structures across Police Scotland that can identify and support retail crime, and obviously I've mentioned the new team that's been introduced. Also human trafficking. So we very much heavily rely on information that comes from our public. So intelligence in relation to whether or not somebody's being trafficked. And as the Commander mentioned about our proactive and priority crime teams, they support my officers in relation to identifying whether people are getting trafficked or not, following that information. Some of that information can come from Home Office, and we can do joint visits as well. Also in relation to prostitution as well, potentially. And again, that's based on intelligence, and it tends to be information that comes from public and our partners about whether or not there's something untoward going on in an area, and whether that's my community police officers with specialist support across the division that also attend. I've mentioned about the drugs work that we're doing within the area. That is also linked to serious and organised crime, and that is again based on information and intelligence that we receive from public and from our partners in respect of what people are seeing. Those links to other areas of Scotland, that people are living in our area, but they're actually linked to other areas of Scotland, and that serious and organised crime nature. So a lot of different elements, and yes, it does feature across Clackmannanshire, but I think, like I've said a number of times in this meeting, and I'm going to say it again, we rely heavily on information from our public and from your constituents in relation to understanding what that picture looks like within Clackmannanshire. It allows us to then progress search warrants, for example. It gives us the evidence to allow us to do stop searches of people in the street and stop vehicles. Road crime is linked to obviously serious organised crime just in its very nature. So I emphasise again, we rely heavily on information from our public and our partners.
Which brings me around maybe to my last question on that topic is, how aware are the public? Do they know what to look out for? Do they know what are the surface signs of organised criminal activity? And so that they're alert to spotting it in their neighbourhood, in their street, where they shop. Do you think the public here in Clackmannanshire are aware of what to look for?
I think there'll be some people that do and some people that don't, and that's something that I can then have a think about in respect of some of our social media and some of the articles that we can maybe work with partners to actually deliver to our public. We've had recently cannabis cultivations within the area, and I've emphasised about where they were and the impacts that has on the community, and it's something that I think we could potentially do a joint approach about how we can present to the public what sort of things they should be looking for, so that they can provide information via Crime Stoppers to yourselves, directly to the police, in a variety of different ways. So yeah, no, that's something that I'll definitely take away, think about how we can deliver that from a joint approach, from a partnership perspective, about how we can present information to the public about what to look for.
And in Forth Valley, we have a dedicated intelligence development unit. And I would restate what Kat says. So quite often they'll come back to us and they'll say, we've had a report of, we're doing some development of, we've seen a cluster, we've seen a pattern, we've seen the same names coming up. And also, most units across Police Scotland have their own intelligence development units, and they all speak to each other. So Kat mentioned, when it comes to the assistant roads policing officers can give us, it's not just about road crime, it's about the criminal use of roads, so drug trafficking, etc. We'll quite often get intelligence from the roads policing intelligence unit into our unit saying, this is something that you want to be looking at, and we'll develop a plan for it, or vice versa. We'll say, we're seeing these patterns across Forth Valley or Clackmannanshire, we'll feed it into the roads policing and say, can you factor that into your tasking when you're out in our streets? So it does come back to the more we can be told about. Even sometimes if people make a report and we don't necessarily see a pair of boots on the ground, half an hour later, we're building up a problem profile and we can put a plan to tackle that.
Any other questions? Councillor Field?
Yes, going back to the road traffic, it's the no right turn at McDonald's. People seem to ignore routing. Has anybody been fined for that? Thanks.
No, thank you, councillor. So yes, So I've raised it with Clackmannshire Council, working in partnership about just getting the road markings and the signage improved, and I know that the team are working on that to get that as a priority. Obviously, there was a recent accident there, and although that was not the contributory factor, there was obviously individuals that did actually go against the notice of turning right. Road policing officers did attend at that, and those two individuals have been progressed to Procurator Fiscal in relation to notice of intended prosecution, but the Procurator Fiscal has actually stated that they've made the decision that it's not in the interest of public justice to actually progress those notice of intended prosecution. So in relation to those specific cases, they are not getting progressed. But my officers have actually allocated enforcement to other drivers that have turned right at the no right turn into McDonald's. So that has already been allocated, yes.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks so much. And I'm happy to move this paper. As always, you've provided us with really comprehensive information. I think it's a really accessible report, which I've always found really useful. Very transparent as well, lets us know what's happening in the area. So it's always an excellent read, actually. And as I said to you at the start of the meeting, it makes me struggle for questions because you've answered so much already in what you've presented. So highly commend the report that you've provided us again and the very open information. So thank you so much. So happy to move the paper.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Any seconder? Councillor Coyne? We're open to debate. Would you like to debate the paper? No. Happy to note the paper? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, now we go to item 5, the Fire Performance Report Annual 1st of April to 31st of March 2024-25. And this will be presented by Group Commander Rachel Rogers, and we have David Scott in attendance. Sorry, I don't know your title, David.
Oh, Station Commander David Scott.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an overview of the year of performance of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in Clackmannshire, covering the period 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025. The report is based on performance against objectives and targets set out in the local fire and rescue plan for Clackmannshire performance indicators and detailed in the summary report. SFRS is pleased to introduce a new report template which provides the committee with the additional information relating to the local area. This report is an interim 12-month report which will be updated and brought back to the committee later in 2025 once it has been ratified. It is recommended that the committee note and scrutinise the report as appropriate. There are a number of significant trends that are worth highlighting. We've had 3 fire-related fatalities and 15 fire casualties in the reporting period. Each fire fatality is fully investigated by dedicated fire investigation officers along with Police Scotland. Findings from these investigations are used to support future community safety initiatives and interventions. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service delivers seasonal thematic action plans from the 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025. These targets include reducing accidental dwelling fires, reducing fire fatalities and casualties, reducing deliberate fire setting, reducing the number of outdoor fires, and reducing fire-related antisocial behaviour. There were 37 accidental dwelling fires, a decrease when compared with the same period the previous year. The cause of these fires has predominantly been cooking-related activities, which in Scotland is the #1 cause of fires in the home. This will continue to be a focus of our ongoing prevention work. Work continues to identify and support vulnerable people in Clackmannshire through the Home Fire Safety Visit Programme and fire safety referrals through multi-agency activity. The quantity and quality of referrals from partners allow the service to target resources with Clackmannshire with the aim of reducing the number of accidental dwelling fires and casualties from these fires in the long term. During the reporting period, local operational crews and the Community Action Team carried out 351 home fire safety visits 113 of these home fire safety visits were for those deemed as high risk within our communities. The Youth Volunteer Scheme continues to be a success at Alloa and will become a pivotal part of youth engagement within the Clacks area. There were 83 deliberate fires recorded during the reporting period, and this continues to be an area of focus for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and partners to reduce instances of fire and antisocial behaviour within the local authority area. The number of unwanted fire alarm signals during the reported period was 70, and this is a significant reduction of previous reporting years. We continue to monitor all UPAS activity and have introduced a new approach to responding to UPAS incidents. SFRS continue to work with duty holders to discuss where implications of UPAS and identify the improvements that can be made. We are also informing duty holders of the latest fire detection technology available, which has proven to help with reducing unwanted fire alarm signals. And that is the end of the report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we're open to questions. Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Chair. Back to the question I started off with the police. It's on recruitment and establishment. Where are you sitting with the percentage of establishment you're at the moment?
So at the moment, we are sitting, I'd be lying if I told you exactly where we're at. But so I haven't got those figures, but I could probably get them back to you. But we do have recruitment intake happening in the late summer with a course of, I think, 72 trainees that will be joining the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Now, that is for the whole of Scotland. So, but I would have to get back to you with exactly where we're sitting locally in terms of vacancies.
Okay, so maybe you could let me know what the impact of the current shortages are. I mean, that obviously means you're going to have to, prioritise some of what you do. And for example, you took a strong stance on the waste of time on unwanted fire alarms, for example. What would be the next thing you would need to sort of look at working on to cope with the establishment shortages?
So in terms of establishment shortages, we always fill those. So in terms of operational firefighters, we will pay overtime to make sure that appliances go out to the doors. So we don't run at a shortage in terms of the work we do. We still carry out the same work. And within our departments and our community engagement teams, they are fully established just now. So the preventative work and the home fire safety visits, they will all carry on as normal, regardless of the actual current staffing levels. So we'll always have people retiring and people developing, but in terms of the actual work that's done, the same amount of work will be done. It will not have an impact on that. Okay.
That's good to know. Completely separate question. Battery fires, these battery establishments are becoming more and more coming across the planning department's desk and will continue to do so in the future. There's a lot of local neighbourhood concern about these things as being dangerous, explosive, all the rest of it. What's your view on the current status, the risk attaching to these battery establishments?
So the battery storage facilities, the large-scale ones, are best. They're classed as an emerging risk for the fire service, so we're still collecting data on that. There is kind of long life and short life working groups that are looking to kind of collect all that information, and then it's working through a fire safety enforcement. Ultimately, I think where they're being built is we're working with kind of local authorities with kind of regarding the location and everything. So we're classed as an emerging risk. We're still working on it. We appreciate the local concerns, but the kind of data gathering is still happening, and ultimately we're still capable of responding to these incidents when they do happen. But we're still in the kind of information gathering phase. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm now wearing a planning hat just for a moment. That it's something that the planning department will have to take account of, the risk element and the radius of the danger. So it'd be good if that kind of data was coming through to inform our decision making. What's the likelihood of that happening on a time scale? Or have you a time scale for that?
I don't have a timescale here in this meeting, but I will absolutely take it off the table and I'll get back to you. I'll get back to the whole council regarding timescale. I can just confirm that that works. Both within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service nationally, within government, and kind of everybody's working together to kind of get the planning laws and what the kind of scope and scale of those have to look like. But I'll be able to come back to you with a better answer.
Thanks.
Just in terms of, I mean, obviously we've seen loads of warnings across the press at the moment for wildfires. So obviously it's becoming more and more of an issue. I don't know if it's more of an issue or just reported more, to be honest, but I'm just wondering if you feel that, you know, if we were flooded with wildfires all over the summer, whether you would have the capacity there to cope with that.
Thank you. I think we do have the capacity. We always respond when we are required. As you've just mentioned, we've had a really busy period now, and we were able to cope with a number of wildfires happening at the same time. At this time, there's been no recall to duty, but that is an option we have if required. But to my knowledge, that's not happened in the recent years. I think that the concentration of wildfires when we get these periods of hot weather, the focus that we're putting on that is to try and educate the public to be more careful, not to. Most fires are caused by humans, either not putting out their campfires or throwing away cigarettes, or you know, as we're aware, we do have deliberate fire setting as well, which is really helpful. And sometimes we've got wildfires being created from mill burns that have gone out of control. So education around all these things is what we're focusing on to try and prevent wildfires happening. But we do believe that as a service we can cope and respond when required to both wildfire and flooding incidents. Thank you.
Just on the back of what Rachel said, there's also been the National Fire Service. Also got the kind of the scale to kind of bring in appliances from kind of all over regarding where these incidents are happening. So that kind of scale of response is there as well. So.
Yeah. Yes. No. Okay.
Thanks. A bit off piece this one. It's not what we're talking about. I'm looking at at page 53 for the road traffic collisions in this period. When you talk about road traffic collisions, is it against the ambulance or the fire service being in collisions, or is it the people who are driving not actually getting out of the way of the fire ones?
Thank you. So when we talk about road traffic collisions, it's incidents that we've attended. So it will be incidents that we have been mobilised to help people who've been in those collisions. That's what those figures are.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bailey.
Thanks, Chair. You made reference there to the deliberate fire reasons 83 that we're talking about in this report. Are there any of those, or a percentage of those, have led to any criminal proceedings? And in that part where it talks about those 83, it talks about being an area of focus for the SFRS and partners to reduce instances of fire. What does that look like? What work is it that you're doing that's looking to reduce those numbers?
Thank you. The majority of deliberate fire setting probably doesn't get prosecuted, if I'm honest, because by the time we get there, they're gone. But we do obviously work with Police Scotland, and where we believe there has been willful or deliberate fire setting, we do mobilise them, and they come and will carry out their own investigation to that end. But in honesty, there's probably very few that are caught unless they're doing it on camera, and you know,
or regular offenders that somebody recognises running away. In terms of what we do to prevent that comes under our protection term. We've got a whole team. We'll go out and we'll carry out school visits. We try and educate early on, try and create interventions. We have fire starters, they call it? Fire setters? Fire setters, not fire starters, that wouldn't be good. The fire setters programme, and we also have our community engagement where we try and bring young people in, especially if they've been identified as having an interest in fire setting. We'll maybe bring them in and try and just educate them the best way we can. Where we have periods of activity, and I know that the police mentioned earlier about Tillacucci, we were also part of that intervention where we tried to show more visibility, patrols, attending the schools in the localities where we're having more problems, and really trying to push that message of the implications of their actions, that, whilst they might think this is quite a bit of fun and we get a fire engine to come out, that fire engine probably needs to be somewhere else where somebody's life could be at risk. So we try and push those messages, and that's the main crux of the work that we do in prevention. Have you got anything to add? I'm asking, David is the station commander for the prevention team, so he might have something to add there. Thank you.
If a little point to add is that every primary school gets 2 visits, particularly looking at kind of primary 6, primary 7, doing 2 visits a year, one before bonfire night and one before summer, to kind of highlight the risks of these kind of deliberate fire settings, and then that moves on through high school as well, where we offer visits to the high school. So that's the kind of the ongoing kind of intervention that we're always trying to kind of drive forward, especially for the young people at school.
Can I just clarify, is that about early education rather than believing that that's the high risk group? Is that just about trying to get them early rather than thinking that's where the fires are coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. That's early intervention. There's just to educate as opposed to thinking that they're particularly high risk groups.
Other questions? Oh, sorry.
No, it was just to add that we, and I know I've mentioned this before, we also have the fire skills courses as well, which run, and again, that's we try and focus that on kids who are mostly going to benefit from it, and try and give them education.
Questions? Well, again, very happy to move this paper. I think, and mentioning accessibility again, it's really well presented. I really like the accessibility of the report, and particularly the headline page, which really makes you want to read further. So it's really well put together. So thank you very much. And looking at it, I learned a lot about what you do, but also just what you're highlighting there about the work with children and young people. They get so excited when the fire brigade are there. So I think it's an excellent way to provide that preventative work. So. Well, thank you so much for putting the report together for us. It's been really helpful to the committee, and happy to put it forward. So can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fairley. We're open to debate. Would anybody like to debate the paper? Oh, happy to note. Okay, thanks so much. Thank you for coming along. And we're now moving on to the HSCP Joint Inspection Improvement Plan, and that will be Joanne MacDonald, Interim Chief Officer. And I see Wendy Forrest is there as well. Hi, Wendy. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm really pleased also to follow the Scottish Fire and Rescue, and a huge thanks for all the support that they provide to our care homes, the home visits that they provide to our most vulnerable people as well. A lot of the work that's hidden behind the scenes that actually is keeping our most vulnerable, particularly older adults, safe. So thank you very much for that. I'm also really pleased to be here, and for Wendy to be here as well, to go through with you what is quite an operational improvement plan, but I really wanted to really give you some of the detail. So members will be aware that between April and September last year, we had an inspection of integration of our mental health services. That report was published in November, and we gave a briefing to all members here in January, the end of January. I think what's really important to emphasise about the inspection was it wasn't about the quality of services, it was about the integration of services. And we as a partnership had already recognised a number of the areas that actually subsequently came out in the inspection report. Whilst there were nearly 5,600 referrals to the mental health services in 2024-25, and that's across Clacks and Stirling, actually that's only part of the services that have been delegated by Clackmannanshire Council to the partnership. So as a partnership, we decided to take the learning and apply that across the whole of the partnership in relation to our integration journey. So you'll see within the improvement plan targets and our ambition around, for example, self-directed support, which is enabling people to be supported flexibly. And you'll see a target date there as well in the improvement plan. We've actually started to implement that across the whole partnership as of the 1st of April this year. And I'm giving that as an example, I suppose, for what can feel quite a theoretical plan when you're reading it, to actually what's the difference that that's making. The difference that that single action in itself is making is that as of the 1st of April, anyone who's making contact to social work here in Clackmannanshire is having their referral triaged by a multidisciplinary team the following day, with a response going back to them. So that's for all of our new referrals. So we're starting small in relation to self-directed support, but we're taking the application across the whole of the partnership. I think what's really important here is that so much of this work is hidden work, and so much of this work is for our most vulnerable people in our communities. And as I said, with over nearly 5,600 referrals to mental health across the whole of Clackmannanshire and Stirling, so a significant part of our community. In relation to progress, we're on target in relation to improvement plan, and also we're trying to be much more visible. So really welcome being here and having the opportunity to meet with you. And I know that this inspection was specifically about mental health services, but we're really happy to come and talk to you about any other integrated services that the council made the decision to delegate to the partnership, and we've got the privilege of delivering. In relation to next steps, we are anticipating with the Care Inspectorate that they will come back early in 2026, although I would say a wee caveat to that, which is a positive, on the basis of the collective and collaborative work that the Care Inspectorate saw and Healthcare Improvements Scotland saw when we met with them in February to actually go through our improvement plan. They stated that they would have confidence, and they had confidence in the improvements they'd already seen in relation to integration, that they would step back and allow us to not have the regular, very regular meetings with them around this specifically, but to move to the link inspector providing that support across the whole partnership. So I'm going to pause there and maybe bring in Wendy just to add in any very specific detail that I've missed. But I'm hoping that the report, and it's quite a brief report deliberately in the improvement plan, actually do give the flavour of the work that's been progressed since November within the partnership.
Thank you. Good morning. Wendy Forrest, Head of Strategic Planning and Health Improvement for the Health and Social Care Partnership. I think Joanna's covered a significant amount of activity. I think the work that's probably very formalised in terms of the implementation of the plan is that we're continuing to have an inspection steering group, which is co-chaired by myself and Joanna for the transition between our previous Chief Officer and Joanna as the Chief Officer. So what we have is a really robust programme of work, a really robust oversight group, and our colleague, Chief Social Work Officer from Clackmannanshire Council and also from Stirling Council are active participants in that in terms of their statutory role as Chief Social Work Officers. We've got a number of other planning groups and functions which support this work in terms of how we implement and operationalise the self-directed support policy, as well as the carer services and support for carers, which I know was identified as an area of weakness for us in terms of how we support those with mental health issues and their carers at the same time. So there is significant work underway with our carers lead and our short breaks coordinator, who are part of the new delivery model around the multidisciplinary team daily meetings. So I suppose those are just the things I think which are about how we operationalise this, because as Joanna says, it doesn't always feel like this kind of document is making an impact, but I think from the feedback we've had anecdotally from carers and from individuals, that they're starting to really feel a difference in terms of that integrated space, that they are receiving their care support and treatment in a much more integrated way, which is absolutely the spirit of the legislation in terms of the Public Bodies Act. Thank you.
To questions, any questions, Councillor Coyne, and then followed by Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. It's obviously an awful lot of intention and work has gone into this. If it seems a bit mean to say anything adverse about that, but I want to ask a question. It's a plan. A plan has an objective. Those objectives can be defined as certain outcomes, and there must be some way of measuring those. What I'm not really getting a handle on is how a year from now, when we come back and look at this, we'll be able to say, you did well, you didn't do well, you did badly. We don't have a metric really to judge the plan. I think that's something that we'd like to see incorporated maybe at the next stage, something like that. And also, just while we're talking about numbers and plan design, I did mention this to Wendy the other day. In terms of quoting statistics internally, that we interviewed so many folk from here and whatever it was, that needs a background, you know, what percentage penetration was achieved there, because if you look up any statistics book, you'll see that if your marketplace is 100 units, then you should interview them all. You should be a minimum interviewing of 100 up to a maximum of, say, 1,000 people. That's a normal range for significance in statistics. So if we're going to use statistics, we might as well sort of abide by the rules and try and contextualise, you know, so that we get an idea. If you say 5 people did this, we don't know if that's good, bad, or different. So that would be quite helpful as well. So I'm sorry to criticise what's obviously a lot of work.
No, I think it's we're here really to get criticism, thoughts, suggestions, and also because this is about our plant manager residents. Ultimately, we want them to have the best support and services that they can. In relation to the performance indicators, you'll see within the improvement plan, actually that's where we don't have we've got a lot of national performance indicators, but what we want to know is how does this impact locally? So that's actually one of the actions, and I think the timeline for that is for September, because we want to do it right. So if you're seeing a number of the timelines are September 2025 or October, that's because we want to do it right, and we want to do it with people. Going on to the number of people who were interviewed as part of the process, and also that also included the 3 chief executives who have got responsibility for overseeing the services here. What that doesn't really give you the flavour of is actually the people like the leads for the third sector in the interface, for carers and others who engaged with their own groups and participated as well through surveys and through other methods in order to inform the inspection. I think it's probably fair to say that when the inspection report was published in November, and when we met early in December, I think it was the 17th of December, it was my first week in post, with a range of people across the system, it landed in a really difficult way. People found it really hard to hear. Reinforced, and we've been reinforced, and this is about how services are inspected, are integrated. It's not about the care I might receive from my social worker or my CPN. That was not part of the inspection. But what I saw, and it was day 2 in post, and Wendy arranged to meet with absolutely everyone who's involved in the process, we had a room full of people, was a real willingness. This is where we're at, so let's accept that. And let's really build an action plan, an improvement plan, that's going to deliver here in Clackmannanshire and Stirling. So the improvement plan that you are seeing was actually one that was co-created and influenced by people actually in receipt of the service. So in relation to Wendy mentioned carers groups and other carer representatives, they are absolutely critical to us understanding how services are delivered. And we want to hear from them, and we want to hear from you where it's not working well. So, because that is really important for us to understand why and to deliver the improvements. But the performance indicators, you're absolutely right. That's work that we want to know, how has this impacted here in Clackmannanshire in relation to where we were, and that's improvement work that's been taken forward as part of the action plan. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Thank you. I think the point about performance is really important, and when we talk about the new MDT working, what we have is our performance colleagues within that meeting every morning within Clackmannanshire, within Stirling, and they're collecting the data of throughput, the number of referrals, where those referrals are going, how long those referrals are taking to be processed, how long, the number of people who are signposted into other services, the number of people who require, for example, an adult social, an adult care support plan, the number of people who are being referred, for example, for long-term care. And actually, when the case is discussed within an MDT way, actually that's not what they need. What they need is additional support at home to remain independent. And so that data is being collected by our performance colleagues working really closely alongside our operational colleagues. So you're absolutely right, that outcome, those impacts for people are being collected from the 1st of April in terms of that delivery. Thank you.
Councillor McTaggart.
Hi, John, I've got a few questions, if that's okay. This report plan is clearly strategic, and it centres around research, consultation and development, etc. The target times appear to be quite ambitious, given that there's so much work involved in taking this forward. We most start by the end of 2025. Are these achievable and realistic? Will we see almost like a final outcome towards the end of this plan being implemented, and how it will take us forward? I'll ask if you want to answer that, and then I'll come back in if that's okay.
Yes, thank you for that. The timelines were really developed with people in receipt of services and people who represent them, and they are ambitious, which is why we're meeting on a monthly basis to go through with key colleagues around how we're delivering. We're going to constantly be on an improvement journey. So within a year, we certainly want to see, and you will want to see, clear evidence that indicators in here, you're right, about how we measure performance, about how we're actually doing that, how we're progressing with self-directed support, how we're supporting carers. You will definitely want to see that within a year we are making progress there. So I think in relation to a year, we are being, and there's a lot of critique and criticism around this, but there was also a real ask from people receiving mental health services that we were ambitious for them and that they are dependent on us. So in relation to the September in particular timeline and time it's marching on, it feels maybe it's my age, it feels it's getting quicker and quicker. That's the timeline we're working towards, but we're being very clear at each meeting, is that deliverable? And I would fully expect and would like to actually be taken back to elected members where we're at, whether that's in 6 months come September, if you would like an update then, as opposed to waiting for the full year. Because this is all about people receiving services, and what the inspection told us was you are not integrated very well. When you're hearing words such as weak, inadequate, that's not what we want for our Clackmannanshire communities. We want better than that. So we're not going to get to excellence within a year, but I fully expect on the basis of the progress that's been made in the last 5 months since the inspection, that we will achieve the timelines, the deadlines there, but we'll also be honest, if we're not 100% there, we've got further work to do.
Thanks, John.
You mentioned SDS there, and we've had this conversation before. I've got personal experience how absolutely woeful SDS is in Clackmannanshire. And still like that we chat with you at some point. SDS in particular is, I mean, it's obviously it's complex. It's complex not necessarily for us who work in this arena, but for people to understand how SDS can be delivered for them and how it would be the best approach for their particular care needs. Right now, you mentioned SDS Forth Valley. I contacted them years back when I first took on the role as carer for my niece. And I only got the advice that I already knew. How do we support people to understand what the best option is for them with SDS? And how do we ensure that services are available locally to access with their SDS rather than them having to put themselves through some kind of additional turmoil on top of the fact that they're a carer for somebody who's very, very challenging. So SDS, I think, if we're going to look at the short breaks model, etc., I think SDS is crucial, and I think it's crucial that we get that right before we start jumping in with 2 feet for other things. So how do we ensure that?
I couldn't agree more in relation to where we're starting. For self-direct support, we've got a long journey to go. Over the last 2 months, we've met with over 100 frontline AHPs, physios, OTs, social workers, nurses, to actually discuss how they're supporting individuals in the community. And on the back of that came that real desire, willingness to change the way from that. And this is starting with a very narrow frame, that first referral to social work, when someone plucks up the courage to ask for support. And from your own personal experience, that's a difficult thing to do. That we want to ensure that for all of our new referrals, as of the 1st of April, that we're looking at that in a multidisciplinary way, and we're responding in a way that meets their needs. Ultimately, the self-direct support legislation starts at the very beginning, and it is about that first conversation that takes place and ensuring, and I've heard here of people waiting 3-4 months to actually hear what's happened after they've made a call in to social work. So with Sharon's support here, the Chief Social Work Officer support, which has been fantastic, we're looking at how we change that and how we go back to responding people. When we then get on to through the process, that as we have seen in the last few weeks, where actually a referral will come through for care at home, which is one of the 4 options. We then think about how we deliver that. Actually, people are needing a bit more carer support, they're needing a break, or they're already known to mental health services or others. That support is going in now, before we look into the more formal services. When we then get into the choice, flexibility and control of the 4 options, you are absolutely right. We haven't had those options here. I'm really pleased to say that the IGB in March made a decision, and Wendy can expand a little bit about that, around short breaks and really to ensure that as part of self-direct support implementation, we've got options and opportunities for short breaks. And that is what we have heard, and what I've heard consistently in my own career, is people don't just want a residential break. They don't just want a loved one to go into a care home or to go in somewhere to stay to give them a week break. They want at times just go out for a couple of hours in an evening, just to get a breather. They want that flexible support to support their needs. And for me, that's at the heart of the self-directed support legislation. We have got a lot of work to do, so I totally agree with that. And I look forward to, I know we spoke before about having that conversation, so I'll make sure that that happens. Because we need to hear what it's really like for people here in Clackmannanshire when they're needing support, and what options are available to suit them and their individual needs and their family needs. I'll ask Wendy to maybe expand a little bit about the short breaks and the intention there.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart. I think there's 2 things. So the short break service, we have a short breaks coordinator role who's part of that MDT every morning, and what she's doing is, as part of the legislation, in terms of identifying, in terms of signposting, in terms of triaging, and then referring in for an adult care support plan, those 4 elements of the Act. Her job at that first point of referral, whether it's in the MDT or whether it's coming through, is to identify the carer within that wider context. That short breaks statement that we got agreed within the Integration Joint Board is about that flexibility. So it's more than bed-based respite. It's about somebody having the flexibility of being able to go out in the afternoon and do something different. So it could be a short break at home, it could be bed-based respite, or it could be the opportunity to do something quite different with the respite available and the short break available. So we're at the very early stages of that, but that is work that's underway and ongoing. In terms of the wider response in terms of self-directed support, our commissioning of local services is absolutely vital, and the commissioning of how we deliver care, support and treatment within our communities is a significant part of our work. And what we need to identify, and what we have been identifying, is the type of and level of service that we need to commission within Clackmannanshire to be able to provide the right support for people. That commissioning, I cannot underestimate how important it is in terms of people who want to be employers through a direct payment, the challenge of having the right commission service, and also being able to recruit a personal assistant within that context. Again, these are really significant issues, not just within Clackmannanshire, but nationally, getting the right people to do that. And as you will know, the undertaking of becoming an employer is a big undertaking for people, particularly if you have additional needs for care and support. Becoming an employer on top of that is significant. We do, to go back to our performance, we do report annually around self-directed support and the 4 options into government, and we're very mindful for people who actually want the Health and Social Care Partnership with services delegated from Clackmannanshire into the partnership. That's what some people will choose, and that's absolutely right and proper. But for other people, the appointment of a PA or more than one PA might be the road, and that's where SDS Forth Valley is absolutely vital. And we have quite a different relationship with them now than we had previously. It's a much closer relationship, and they work with us to provide training, learning and development for our own staff, but also for the carer centres and the wider third sector, because the awareness, the understanding of the 4 options and the principles, as well as the statute requirements of the Act, are really important within that context, that everybody is confident and clear, including our own people, about what the requirements are of the Act. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Just on the short breaks, I'm not clear about how this would work, is it especially for people with mental health issues. Do the short breaks mean that it's the cared for person who gets a break and goes off and does some, with support obviously, or the carer who gets a break while the cared for person is looked after in their absence? Because I would say it's probably a blend of both that I would think would work best, but I'm just wondering what you see as the model for this care.
So the legislation is about supporting carers, but what I think is really exciting about the way that Wendy's leading the short breaks here in Clackmannanshire and Stirling is it is looking at the carer and the person they're cared for. And that's where, when we think about traditional respite, where someone would go into a care home and have a week's break, actually what we've heard from carers is, at times for them having a break, for them to go away together for a weekend and have a carer with them, to do things together, that particularly for older adults where their loved one has got dementia, to actually do things that are normal things and routine things that people do. So I think it's targeted to the person who is the carer to give them a break, but actually the short breaks and the way that it's being progressed here is actually it's looking at the totality of the family and what the carer really wants, and giving them the options that suit them as well, which I think is really exciting. We're not there, as Wendy and as you had said, we're at the start of that journey, but actually it is about thinking differently, and about not categorising or not giving people the only options available, which have been quite traditional ones, but really looking at them being bespoke to the individual, which is where probably more direct payments comes in, and the option 2 of self-directed support. We're not there at the stage yet with our more traditional services, but yeah, it's certainly more flexibly been promoted here, and the paper was only just agreed by the partnership, the IGB last month, so I think there's still work to do, but certainly again be really interesting, elected members, in hearing from you your views about how we can deliver this and ensure that we're meeting the needs, the individual needs of our communities here.
Quite bluntly, do we have the capacity? Because there's a lack of capacity in this area, as we know, to provide the type of model of care that you're describing. So, lack of capacity being a barrier to how you see this sort of playing out in the real world, let's say, knowing a bit of paper. So, do we have that capacity? And if we don't, how do we create that capacity?
So I'll start off by saying we don't have the capacity, and I think it's unlikely in the future that we will ever meet the needs and wishes of everyone who's coming to us for support. But I think in relation to the way we currently have our services structured, the need for redesign is to create more capacity, more flexibility. So we'll have more flexible support, and we'll have that more personalised support that's in the short breaks paper. But I don't think, I'm not going to sit here and say I think we will be able to meet the needs of everyone coming into the service, because I don't think that will be the case. But we'll meet them as best we can. And I think also for us, and again, the work that Wendy's been leading on has been looking out with the partnership as to what else is out there in our communities that we can signpost people to access, that they can get support. So not coming to paid, costed services, but really looking much broader. But Wendy, who obviously has been involved in the writing of the short breaks paper, will have more to add to that here.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. I think the change, and it's that referral process and the front door in inverted commas, if we don't get good conversations at that point and we don't avoid duplication of effort across, if we have integrated teams who are working around the person as opposed to teams working within different parts of the system independently of each other, that MDT working, multidisciplinary team working, creates capacity for us to be able to think really differently about how we deliver. The point of assessment and everything we talk about is based on that assessment process. The assessment following that initial contact from people is absolutely vital in terms of building what currently exists for individuals, what's in the community that they already access, what's the support that the family is currently offering. So everything we do is about the additionality of not just what we can do in terms of HSCP services, but what else. Most people access a whole range of things out with the bit of the work that we do. And it's about how do we almost corral that into one place so that we've got a really holistic view of that individual and their needs. And if we can free up some of the, dare I say, bureaucratic processes that we create here in all of our systems, to actually free up our workers to do that asset-based assessment, to bring all of that together so that the bit we provide is absolutely the bit it should be, but everybody else in terms of community, in terms of family, in terms of personal assistance in that wider system is all there wrapped around the individual. I appreciate that probably sounds quite pie in the sky, but actually we cannot continue the way we are going just now. We can't afford it, and we cannot meet everybody's needs. So that need for transformation and change in terms of how we are part of people's lives is absolutely significant in terms of being able to meet demand and need.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Joanna.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So some of what I was going to cover has been picked up, and actually some of the questions I'm going to ask have been touched on anyway, but asked in a different way. But what struck me about some of the language in this paper, C8 and C9, I'm going to ask the question anyway, just to see what response I get to this, Joanna, but it talks about the two local authorities integrate the NHS board, and they've been the only model in Scotland, the only ones in that situation. And in 389, that talks about the unique challenges can affect outcomes, does not progress at the same pace as other health and social care partnerships at an early stage of integration. Is that language written in that way to reassure us that we will get there? Or is it written in a way that says, because of that model, they will continue to be a feature? We're always going to be in that position. We're behind others because of the structure that we're operating to. Or is that language just to reassure us that we will catch up with the others?
If I can respond to that, I think that language just demonstrates when you've got two councils and an NHS board together, there's more complexity. From my perspective, I know I've only been here 4 months, I think that gives us a unique opportunity to be more ambitious for our populations here, to use the strengths across the three organisations to deliver the best outcomes. I think it also gives us, as the inspection said, the grades that we got were weak and inadequate, they weren't good. And that really, I think, demonstrates, that statement really demonstrates that actually there was additional complexity there. But going back to the meeting that took place early in December, where we met with a core group of people and real commitment in the room on the basis of this, that we were going to improve this for our populations here in Clackmannanshire and Stirling. That has been done as a single plan, a single approach. So I think, whilst I can reassure you around, are we going to get there as quickly or as other areas have done? I think what we've got is a level of ambition, probably because we're starting from a low starting point, that 4 months into the delivery of the plan, 5 months since the inspection report, I think there is just a real commitment and we are seeing the change. So, for example, that 1st of April, that we felt, I always say when someone plucks up the courage to ask support from social work, it's a big thing to do that. And the fact that we are now, for all of our new referrals, having a multidisciplinary team approach, we're having that triage and the person's being discussed and getting a response back as well. That is an approach we're taking across the whole of Clackmannanshire and Stirling. So for Wendy and I, we're not looking at this as a Clackmannanshire or a Stirling. Actually, I personally really welcome the fact that we've got two councils supporting our improvement journey here. And I think we've moved away in the structures we've put in place. I've actually addressed a number of the areas of complexity that were commented on in here. I think it's also fair to comment that when we had the inspection over the last year, as members will be aware, there's been a number of changes in the partnership. I'm one of them, but we've actually had a number of changes, including we didn't have a head of mental health and wellbeing services. That's an improvement plan. Ross Teague started in January. He's actually come into a subsequent meeting with Jen Borthwick to talk about psychological services, and it's come to a subsequent CLACS meeting there. So there's things there that have been addressed that I think it probably really address some of the complexities there, but we are unique. I don't see that as a negative. I actually see it as a real positive for us here, looking across the whole Clackmannanshire and Stirling area.
Thanks. A couple of other quick ones, Chair, if you don't mind. 314. It talks about the following scores and then publishes below. The two scores across those 5 items are adequate and weak. What other options, or are there other options in terms of what they could have come out as? Was adequate and weak the only 2 options that were available, or
No, so the care inspectorate, and this is a joint inspection by Healthcare Improvement Scotland Care Inspectorate, so there's weak, there's adequate, there's the care inspectorate, and these are 2 grades. They're actually the lowest grades, weak and then adequate, and they're not good enough. We then have good, and we build on from that. So no, we're aiming for excellent services here. But just to restate that this was about how services, the delivery of integrated services, it wasn't about the quality of services that individuals are receiving. So no, these are the 2 lowest grades, which was why it was so hard for our staff at the time. That's why I felt compelled to actually ensure members were briefed in January around this, and you had a briefing around this, so you were cited on this.
Okay, thanks. Just one last one, Chairman. This might sound pedantic, but it's not meant to be. It talks about the The authority to approve the plan sits with the IGB. In the first page, I think it is in the paper, it talks about it sits with both councils to approve. I think it's not for us to approve, is it? It's simply for us to comment and question rather than approve. Sorry.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion about how to actually ensure that we were making sure the two councils and the board were cited on it. But actually, this is an operational delivery plan, the improvement plan. So it was for the IGB to approve that and instruct and direct the HSCP to deliver that. But actually, for the two councils and the NHS, it's really important and actually noted. I don't think does it justice either, because you want to be cited on it and you want to be assured as well. But we did have a lot of discussion at the time around this, because it is about integration. It is about the decisions that two councils and the NHS board have made in relation to delegation of services to our HSCP. But so yes, you're not being pedantic, because actually we did have discussion as to how we best notify and ensure that the two local authorities and the board are cited on this, but actually it's our responsibility to deliver the improvements.
So apologies, I'm not being critical of the report. Obviously, we've had 2 or 3 iterations of trying to take something forward in the area. Obviously, you're new, Joanna, so you'll not be aware of that. But from when we had the integrated mental health service way back, I think around about 2016, which was a really effective model actually, and that was sort of disbanded. We had a whole consultation on mental health at the time. Nothing went forward. We had a couple of other iterations at that, so this is the kind of latest. But my main concern really is, and I'll come to a question at the end, but like it seems to be a real medical model again. It just feels like that. And it feels like dealing with the situation at this stage where we should have acted earlier. And I know there's some stuff about prevention in there. And there doesn't seem to be much on the bit in the middle, which is giving people counselling so that they don't end up into needing significant help. And, you know, that, for me, that's a really important area. But what's really important as well is it doesn't become a bottleneck where NHS services don't trust people like the third sector to deliver. And that's something I've witnessed firsthand, that's been the case. How do we avoid that happening again? I mean, it's been an ongoing issue for so many years. And then we end up with 2-year NHS waiting lists where people can't get that initial support that they need, which prevents them getting to the stage they need a carer, or you know, that things and it becomes a real medical model rather than a social model, which we know the social model of disability is why self-directed support came about. So why on earth do I not see anything like that in there? I mean, I'm seeing, yes, prevention mentioned and third sector mentioned, but I'm not seeing anything concrete as to how that will actually happen, which is why I'm interested to see what will come back later on. And obviously I sit on the IGB, so I just want to know what you're going to do about those people who don't fit into either of those camps.
So I think a change since 2016 is that just over 2 years ago, NHS Forth Valley agreed that our partnership, the Clack Manager and Stirling Health and Social Care Partnership, would host mental health and learning disability services on behalf of the board. So that it feels like it's relatively new. It was only in the last 2 years. But that actually for me has, and from my own experience of being here 4 months, although it does feel I've been here longer in a really good way because of the engagement that I've seen and I've heard of from colleagues, that's meaning now that we've got, for example, our Director of Psychological Services, our Head of Mental Health and LD, sitting on a weekly basis around our HSCP senior leadership team. We're having the conversations about people. We are a team, and I agree that we're a relatively new team and young team around that. But that is ensuring that there's that shared understanding and knowledge of what's happening across the system. In relation to acute mental health services delivered by the board that haven't been delegated, I think we've also got a lot more sight and visibility in that. And I think the presentation from Jen and Ross will be really helpful for the council to actually see the breadth of psychological services, the breadth of mental health services. I think what this report also doesn't capture and actually that's where the improvement plan has been really critical, is it doesn't capture the amount and the breadth of people we're supporting our communities with dementia and the impact on their carers. And we're really happy to come back and talk specifically about that, because that for me is a lot of hidden work. There's a lot of really good work that's taking place here, but hidden work. So I suppose with the experience that you've had, I can reassure you about what changes are going to take place, but I can assure you about the commitment to deliver the content of this improvement plan and to deliver it, you know, across the whole partnership, which is what we're endeavouring to do. And we will strive to do that. That will be our commitment here as a partnership. I'll bring in Wendy, who's been here 5 years, but who, just to maybe add to what I've just said.
Thank you, and no pressure. So I think the assurance I can offer, and I think Joanna's right, this is about delegation, it's about having a much closer working relationship with our colleagues. The two kind of big chunky things which will come back are we're working on a dementia commissioning consortia, so it's our own services within acute and community supporting people with dementia, and it is people and the representatives and providers who are part of those conversations. So we have got to the point where we understand our funding model as it currently stands in terms of dementia. We've identified where the gaps in commissioning are, and what we will do is bring a paper to the Integration Joint Board in June, which will lay out the model of care, which will be about early intervention and prevention, about investing in our third sector, ensuring that people are getting that psychosocial model within the community. So to exactly address those issues in terms of where we are at with our acute waiting lists, to ensure that people are getting a much broader breadth of care support and treatment, so it's not all within one part of the system, and it's about unpicking that. And our consultants within acute have been really, really supportive of the model and have brought the work that was done in 2017 to the table, and we're building on that work in terms of that community hub model, in inverted commas, to provide ongoing support, treatment, and also advice, information for people within the community. That programme of work will be replicated across mental health with the new commissioning plan for mental health and wellbeing, which Jennifer Borthwick's leading on. That commissioning plan is going to the IJB in June, I think, in terms of having that. Before it comes to the IJB, there is a whole programme of engagement which is kicking off imminently. I mean today, tomorrow, kind of imminently. We spoke to Jen yesterday about where we were at, and that will lead us into a commissioning consortia, which will lead us into a model of care, which is absolutely what you are seeking to describe, in terms of having that breadth of community, early intervention, prevention, that carer support, that bespoke service for people from the third sector, who are, in my opinion, the absolute experts to provide that support, and then getting that medical specialised within acute, but also within community services as well. So, like Joanna, I am offering you that we have a plan, so this time next year, when our colleagues from the Inspectorate come back, we will be able to say we have done this significant engagement participation work, and this will be our model going forward, as we have done with the multidisciplinary team in terms of community health and care. Thank you.
Apologies, I don't think I explained myself right, because I was saying the exact opposite from the kind of high level dementia care, carers and prevention. So I was actually the bit in the middle. I was away from that altogether. So I understand all those things are in place. I can read it in the report. What I'm talking about is the bit in the middle, which is people who just need therapeutic support for a period of time, and they don't fall into that category. They don't seem here. And all those structures in terms of serious people in the mental health team, like senior managers and so on, have been there and have been part of these processes before. But but we've not achieved success for those individuals. And these, I mean, when I used to deliver the service years ago, I had like about 600 to 800 people a year accessing that service. So what happens to them? So, you know, I think that's where I'm concerned. I understand the needs for people with dementia. It's really significant, and, you know, that absolutely needs to be here. I understand the needs of carers. It absolutely needs to be there, and that has been addressed. But I have in my head hundreds and hundreds of people who don't fit into any of those categories, don't want medicalised support, they don't want to be on the psychology waiting list, they just want somebody to talk to. So how's that going to be addressed?
Yeah, and my apologies. I think there are people who are falling into gaps, to use probably bad language, who don't want to access services in perhaps a more traditional way, and also the waiting list that we have around these. I think this would be a good area for me to ask and bring back some information around that. But I know your question wasn't about community. We actually have had, and what we've heard in recent months through this work has been we've got gaps in community where people are being referred to multiple places and just not having someone listening to them, to what they want. And that's going to take us time to really understand that. And also, there is also a perception, which has been right at times in the past, that if I do ask for support, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to be on a waiting list somewhere. So that's not just about a queue or people who don't fit into, you know, the more specialist boxes. We've actually seen that and acknowledged that in community as well. And I think for me, that's one of the hardest bits. I've said a couple of times, when you're asking for support, and it's really hard to do that, particularly if it's something psychological or mental health, the right thing to do is actually to listen to you about what you're looking for and what you're needing, and not categorise you into something that isn't perhaps yours. But certainly we can ensure with the psychological briefing that's an aspect that's included. I'm not saying there's going to be answers to that at the moment, but certainly an area that we absolutely need to be cited on.
Thank you.
Back in just for a second.
Wendy first and then Councillor McTaggart, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Rennie. I think, and this may be a cheeky request, I think your input would be really, really helpful in terms of how we evolve this work and grow and develop it. If you were prepared and willing, we would absolutely welcome you to be part of this process.
I'd like to be, thank you. Councillor McTaggart.
I'm just thinking the Family Wellbeing Partnership and Club Manager have done massive amounts of work, huge progress in a very, very short space of time. So some of the people that Councillor Rennie's talking about are the people who have successfully set up and are delivering projects that have taken them out of the zone they were in and put them into a new zone and give them a new zest for life, for want of a better term. So there are elements in Club Manager that would help. There's sector elements, but, and it's a big but, we need to be able to, we need a conduit where people are identified, encouraged, supported to take that step. And I didn't see that in this plan, where we can say, right, this environment isn't for you. However, this environment is exactly what you need. As you know, we also have Strive that can identify whole family aspects where gaps are, where people are missing support. So it doesn't necessarily have to be everybody is going through this one door. Some people might have to go in other doors in order to get the help and support that they need. I run a third sector organisation for nearly 20 years. In that, it became a holistic befriending project along with everything else, especially for older people. And I tried to get a recognised befriending project running. Unfortunately, funding wasn't available. That is the kind of thing that we're missing in Club Manager, is a wee road where people can go down and get this wee virtual hug if they need it, without having to access health and social care, but can get social care in inverted commas that is that they can lift and lay when they need it. But we are lacking in something like that.
Somebody Taggart, can you frame it in a question, please?
Oh, this I'll boy with you. So, are there any elements of this plan that could deliver that type of thing?
Thank you for the question, and I'm aware that Lorraine is in the room, so I will provide the answer, and if I miss anything, I'm sure Lorraine can come in. I sit in the Family Wellbeing Partnership as the representative of the Health and Social Care Partnership. I also I am part of the Strive Board in terms of alongside my GP colleagues, so primary care are also in the room alongside colleagues from across Clerks Council and the wider what I would describe as community planning partnership. The approach that we have taken with Strive, and we have talked long and hard about the presentation of people with mental health and inverted commas issues. And from a clinical, from a more specialist perspective, the scope of mental health is significant in terms of people who are in stress, in distress, and actually are exactly what you're talking about. They need somebody to support through that navigation of what's available in the community, whether that's Change, Grow, Live in terms of substance use, in terms of the work that our ADP is doing with justice services. There's a lot of partnership work between officers of different parts of the system who are part of that. And one of the investments that we made through the ADP was to have social work services, a social worker and a social care assistant whose focus is substance use and mental health, because we also are aware of the challenges between those comorbidities and the impact for individuals and being able to access support with those two issues and often other issues in terms of that response. So the response is the impact of community link workers, which I know is in the plan, in terms of people being able to get that navigation, that support, whether it's accessing your service, whether it's accessing statutory service. That navigator role is absolutely vital, as well as, and I hesitate to repeat myself, but the commissioning of the right and appropriate services for clerk manager is absolutely vital. So you're right, the right service at the right time for people, but also that ability to come in and out of services, whether that's a mental health support or whether that's a support for substance use or both. You need a flexibility of that psychosocial support in the community. People who listen and people can help and navigate, but also people who can access the right care, support and treatment for those individuals when they present, wherever they present. And there's terminology within social work which is no wrong door, and that's absolutely the approach that we are striving to have here, which is it doesn't matter where people present, whether it's through Kevin's service in terms of homelessness and the Ask and Act, which is about to come in terms of homelessness and housing services. We have to work as a collective, and Clerk Manager is small enough that we can work really effectively. And I know that my colleague Simon Jones is part of the Gender-Based Violence Partnership as the ADP lead, as the mental health improvement lead as well, so that all of that work is there, and we are seeking to commission the right services as a response to what people are presenting with. But you're right, that navigation, that virtual hug for people is absolutely vital, and we need to have our services, our integrated services set up to respond to that. And that's what this plan is about. It might not be really explicit and visible, but it's that response of multi-team working, multidiscipline working, and multi-organisational, whether third, independent or statutory services all coming together.
Thanks, Gabby. Any other questions? No. Okay, I'm happy to move the paper. As you can see by the passionate debate, this is an area that people are really interested in, and that's absolutely as it should be. But it's also, I can commend your paper that it's stimulated that level of discussion. And also thank you very much for the really comprehensive answers. That was really, really helpful. And I'm still resonating on the fact of, you know, what Joanna was saying about the kind of number of people that have got so many doors they knock on and they don't get the right response. So I think it's so key that we need to do this right so that we don't have that in the future. But, you know, really pleased that you brought this paper and given us this time today. I know you're very busy, so thank you so much for that and happy to move the paper. Could I have a seconder, please? Second. Thank you, Councillor McTaggart. We're now open to debate. Would anybody like to debate the paper? No, happy to vote. Oh, sorry.
Just for committee, coming back on a point that Joanna had made earlier in relation to follow-up, do you want a 6-monthly update, an annual update in terms of progress of the plan? As a committee, we can add it into the forward plan.
Yeah, it'd be really useful, I think, if you could come back in maybe 6 months' time. Bearing in mind we've got June as one of the kind of deadlines in it, that's important. It'd be really good to get another report in 6 months if that's possible. Okay. Thank you very much. I was hoping to do all the scrutiny and then move on to a break and then audit. On to item 7 on the agenda, 2023-24 corporate performance. And we have Shelley here with others. So, right, you're all here. Welcome.
Thank you. So this report presents the Council's annual corporate performance report for 2024 and fulfils the Council's statutory duties for public performance reporting and best value. The report also summarises local demographic and population information, along with the challenges, processes and performance results associated with the Council's Statement of Priorities for 23-24. You will note in the report that we are required to publish our performance data no later than the 31st of March to meet statutory deadlines. And I'd like to reassure committee that this has been done with a caveat that it's subject to normal governance and approvals processes. The report also highlights the changes to the statutory performance information direction for 2024 and notes the preparatory work being undertaken along with some of the challenges to implement these required changes. The Council's performance is summarised against 5 corporate themes with detailed breakdowns of performance, trends, comparisons and management commentary also provided for each indicator. Performance is shown across 158 local government benchmarking indicators. An overall summary of these indicators shows that 32% represent positive performance, 50% represent areas where some further work or action is required, and 18% demonstrate areas of underperformance. Committee is asked to note, challenge and comment, comment on and challenge the report, and I'm joined by service colleagues to help answer any specific questions on the report.
Thanks very much. So are we to get any questions? Councillor McTaggart.
It won't be a question, Chris, I promise. Realise that this is like a year out of date, where these figures are. So, are there any major changes that we should be aware of, either improvements or things that are maybe got worse in the last year? I'm thinking things around the child poverty stats or the delayed discharge thing, that is really quite high. So I'm just wondering if there's been any changes worth noting. Thank you.
I'll maybe comment just on the availability of data and that lag, because that is definitely one of the challenges that's outlined in the report, and then perhaps ask Lorraine on what we know about the poverty and maybe if there are colleagues on the delayed discharge. But just on the data lag, that is something that is fed back continuously to Improvement Service and Scottish Government, because it doesn't always provide a very helpful performance picture when we're talking about data that might be 2-3 years out of date, particularly some of the health-related ones where we're looking at 3-year trends or longer. So there is an issue with the lag in data. It is something that I think Improvement Service are trying to improve. The statutory direction for 2024 provides a little bit more flexibility in some of the measures and metrics that we might be able to use. So we should hopefully be able to have a little bit more control locally about some of the information that we present. But I'll maybe pass to Lorraine on the poverty one and then ask some colleagues on the delays discharge.
Thanks very much, Shireen. The child poverty one is a very good example of the figures being way out of date. The updated figures for the trends that is in the report will be available in June. But the child poverty figures are as complex as any, I would say, because the child poverty targets that Scotland is working towards don't use these figures. So they use another set of figures, another data set. So the one that's in this report that is used by the Improvement Service comes from Loughborough University. It's a combination of poverty figures, and it's ones that are published by the Child Poverty Action Group. So for us, we tend to look at the Scottish Government national published statistics, and in March, most recently this year, those figures have shown that there is a slight improvement, a slight fall in child poverty in Scotland, but importantly, that similar fall in Clackmannanshire, which is very welcome. It's very difficult to take a year-on-year approach to these figures, as it is with many of them in the report. You have to look at the overall trends, so we have to be cautious about that fall. But nevertheless, we have actually fallen higher than any other local authority in Scotland for child poverty, only by a small amount, but nevertheless it's a bigger fall. And the figure that I'm referring to is the figure for relative poverty, which is before housing costs. So we now have the fall in that rate takes us to 20.8% of our children in, and that means that there's 139 less children in Clackmannanshire in relative poverty than there was last year. So it could go up again, but nevertheless there is a downward trend in child poverty, which isn't always recognised in this figure here. And some of that is due to the Scottish Child Payment, which there's a reference to in the narrative in the report, but there's also quite a lot of activity locally in terms of interventions and support for energy costs, for childcare costs, a whole range of costs that we're putting in place in Clackmannanshire, which will be contributing to that fall in the figure. Does that answer your question on that one, Councillor McTaggart? I don't know if Wendy or Joanna want to come in on the delayed discharge figure fall figures. Here. You've not got it in front of you, have you? No. Page 95. Page 95.
And actually, it might be helpful to give the current position as well, if that's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate how difficult it is to report on a report that's well out of date, and had been going to be one of my concerns with it, because it's difficult to scrutinise when I know from council so much has moved on.
You found the figure?
So this report does relate to performance, obviously, last financial year. And as you can see there, the number of days that people are delayed, as well as the ranking that we have. And whilst there hasn't been improvement, I would have to, and maybe this is inappropriate, just say where we are now in relation to people delayed in the hospital, if that's okay. So as of yesterday, we had 33 people delayed in hospital across the whole of Clackmannanshire and Stirling. That included 14 people who have been, 50% of whom are delayed less than 2 weeks. and the others who have been delayed due to more complex reasons. We are now one of only 2 partnerships in Scotland that have got a consistent downward trajectory. That is reported to the Scottish Government on a weekly basis, and I attend a weekly meeting with the Cabinet Secretary and the Minister for Mental Health and Social Care, where this is reported, and it's been recognised the progress that's taken place within Clackmannanshire and Stirling. It refers a little bit to the conversation that we had earlier on in relation to changes in practices, but I would have to say the consistent improvement that you will see when we come back next year, I think I really hope that we're going to be in the single digits, if not nearer the top, in relation to our ranking across Scotland. So apologies not being so prepared for that.
No, thanks very much for coming in, just at a short notice there.
Thanks, Joanne.
So really, obviously, like I say, I wanted to make an observation, but then it lends in a question in terms of the information being fairly out of date. But I just wanted to confirm that, like in most areas I can see here, I have a recollection in council that we've seen significant improvements, and I just wanted to clarify that point because some of it looks fairly negative, and just wanted to ask the question of officers that we have seen improvements in most areas across the report, at least, I would imagine.
Thank you, Chair. And I think you're correct. There has been shifts in terms of data to a positive, and I think it builds on from Councillor McTaggart's question. So, for example, in terms of our rent arrears, or whilst it is improving, what I can tell you is in terms of our position has significantly improved again in this year. So in terms of our current in-year rent arrears, we are one of the best in Scotland in terms of our performance there. But we also did bring a paper back to council in terms of historic rent arrears that we expunged in terms of that. So the position should naturally improve as well. But in terms of in-year current performance is extremely positive. I think we're maybe second in Scotland in terms of our performance there. In terms of the discretionary housing payment, whilst it dipped, and a lot of that was around about eligibility, what I can say is in terms of our performance now is up at that 100%, or thereabouts, which is showing that we are getting more money out to our residents, our population, which again builds on that other work around child poverty, etc. A lot of this is interrelated, and we are seeing differences. We are also seeing in terms of whilst general employment opportunities is not necessarily performing as well, those that are going to their own employment programmes is resulting in really positive outcomes for them, and that is increasing as well. So we are seeing positive trends in terms of those shoots in certain programmes coming through, which should have an overall positive impact on our populace.
Thanks. I was hoping you would cover those ones, so thanks very much. MD, any other questions? Councillor Freund?
Thanks, Chair. I want to move to section 3, which is the attainment jobs and economy, starting on page 112, actually referring to information on 112. The last table, people attainment overall. Let's deal with that first of all. I mean, I rank is 31 out of 32. I thought we were doing awfully well. So why am I disappointed?
Colin will join us, Councillor Freund. Rennie, that's okay.
Unemployment rate, isn't it? Unemployment rate.
The people attainment.
Oh, people attainment. Oh, I've got it. Yes, absolutely. I'll page ahead. Yeah, okay. So, tariff points, can I just give a wee bit of background, but I won't labour it. So, say you're an A4 pupil, you're sitting national qualifications. If you would do well up to that point in Scotland, in comparable, we're doing okay. There's been progress. When we go that year into doing the hires, we're seeing a real need we're getting hires, but the quality of them, the A's and B's, is an area for focus for us. And these equate to more tariff points, the A's and B's, than say the C's. Pleasingly, pupils are still getting these important qualifications to go on their pathway into a positive destination. That's not holding them back. But when you do look at that nuance of tariff points, we could do better. There's a couple of ways we could do better. One way is that you can get these tariff points not just through sitting higher exams, you can get them through courses that are maybe more suited to young people that might find going into the exam a real challenge. So what I'm trying to describe is curricular pathways for learners going into that senior phase that make them want to stay on but get these tariff points. So our schools, there's a bit of a lag with the data, but schools have got more options to gain these qualifications through leadership, through health and safety approaches, and more creative courses, skills courses that are getting these points that will show a difference in time. Interestingly, you can see on the graph there that if it goes back actually from 2011 up to 2023, 24, there's an improving trend in Clackmannanshire overall, but you can see that sort of increase in dip. That increase is when we've not had kids going into the exam hall. That is through COVID. So the rationale of having these courses that we don't just rely on that final exam is worth us investing in, because we can see in that model where learners are gaining level 6 qualifications or 5 qualifications through flexible routes. So we need to really invest in that. But also, it's not getting away from the point. It is about pedagogy, it's about teachers really making sure they're supporting learners in getting that high standard of pass. So let's not try and dodge it. We do need to do better, in particular at higher level, in getting these A and B's passes, which can really make a difference there. But you can see that graph, it is dipping. It's back to what we were pre-COVID. And when I previously talked about attainment, it's almost been proud that we've not went too far down from pre-COVID levels, and it's kick on again to get it back up away from the 31 that we're currently sitting at.
Yeah, I accept that, but you know, if you look at the rank for the 5 years quoted, I mean, we've been 30 or 30, 31, 32 all that time. Whatever we're doing isn't working. Would that be a fair assessment of that, or am I missing the point?
I think you make a good point about the curricular options to gain more points. I think other areas have been faster off the mark to make sure that learners can gain these tariff points where we might have been lagging on that traditional model in our secondaries. Not so much up to S4, but for the S5 and 6, that's where we've got to do better. So I don't want to get away from that. I'm not happy at that performance. We will all want to do better. And we have invested a lot in these different courses that will hopefully show that go up. Yeah, I think that's my point.
Is it fair comment then that we're perhaps, by not getting a better grading than that, or being more level with the rest of the country, that we are denying some pupils opportunities that they might, in different circumstances, have been capable of achieving? If they're not coming out of school with the right grade, they'll not be getting into tertiary education that perhaps might enable them to go into some professions or other.
Our data around about sort of school leavers, where they go, is strong in Clackmannanshire. We might come into that in some of the questions, I don't know. But we've always fared well in getting our learners into destinations. It's took a bit of a dip, but we've always been there about. This year we're above national in that. And we've repeatedly been national. So 4 out of the last 5 years we've been above national for getting pupils into courses. So I don't think it's holding them back, but yes, I think we need to do better in our curricular options in that route. Thanks.
Okay, on that last point, I mean, if this is the bottom to the top of the positive outcomes, maybe there are pupils who are getting a positive outcome here, but they should be there. Is the point I'm trying to make. That's where maybe they've been denied the opportunity by getting a positive information, but not one that, not the best they're capable of. I don't want to labour this too much because I want to move on, but it bothers me.
Yeah, I think you make good points, and they're ones that I'll absolutely reflect on. We've seen real progress up to primary from primary school up to S4. We need to take that next step. We need to do that because you're right. Other learners with more tariff points possibly have different options than those that we have there.
Are we doing something about that now?
Yeah. Yes, just was saying the sort of that curricular option, more of these qualifications at level 6 or up to level 6. There's really robust tracking per pupil to try to maximise the amount of tariff points you get per pupil. That tracking's been done. It's been supported with Education Scotland. So this is a focus we're working with that national body as well. Each school's got a targeted approach in partnership with that across our secondaries.
I think there's a danger, Councillor Coyne, that you just look at attainment and the overall attainment and the outcomes for our children and young people in Clackmannanshire are not all about just high attainment. We've mentioned one example, which is that positive destination. And given our demographic, I'm not saying that that's an excuse for us to put a lid on anybody's potential. Absolutely not. We never would do that. However, we have to accept that we've got about 40% of our young people now showing an additional support need. We've got high numbers of children living in poverty, and our schools, have a wide range of approaches to support those young individuals. And it might not be that attainment and high attainment in terms of hires and higher qualifications is the goal for that young person. I think we have to just be slightly cautious about that isn't the be-all. You have to look at that as one indicator. And we, as Colin has said, we need that period does cover kind of COVID and all the way through. And we are continuously trying to improve that for all our learners. But I think there is a backdrop of those other factors that I've mentioned that we also need to take into consideration.
If I can continue, I'll move on to the next section, which is business and economy. I was looking at, where was it now? Yeah, I've lost the one. Oh, here it is. No, that's not it, sorry. Yeah. Well, one is procurement spend with local businesses. Again, I know this has been something of a thing we've been trying to do, but as recently as 23-24, we're still ranked 25. We're a small community. Our businesses need support. I know we've been working on this, but just wondering what it is that we are not doing that's been done elsewhere that makes us rank so low. And this is a table at the top of 118 I'm talking about. So I should have said that at the beginning.
I'm not sure if Lindsay is coming. Obviously, we don't have Derek Barr with us today, but I can certainly look back with Derek in terms of the procurement report and see what support we do give for local businesses in terms of contract opportunities and procurement opportunities. I know across the region, across Clackmannanshire and Forth Valley, our spend locally has increased over the years. But I'll check with Derek and come back to you on that, Councillor Coyne.
For clarity, I'm not saying we're not doing anything. All I'm suggesting is that other folk are getting it right and better than we are. That's all I'm saying.
Chair, if I can maybe come in on that one as well, just in terms of adding to Chris's input, we are performing well in terms of spend. Part of the challenge is in terms of how it is recorded in our systems. So whilst there is spend taken, we know it's getting used by local suppliers here, but the head office may be elsewhere where the invoice is actually registered to. So, for example, the big offices that may be in our bigger cities, for example, that's where the invoices go and that's where the credit for some of that spend's going, although it may be in one of their subsidiaries or their local stores here in that sense. So whilst we are reporting what we know we can categorically say is spent in this locale. The likelihood of a lot of our spend will actually be local as well, but actually because of where it's administered, it could be in the big cities here or somewhere down south, it's getting attributed to those locales. So we can only report specifically on what we know in terms of the system and where it's captured. That's part of the challenge that we have because of the way the markets are working in that infrastructure.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a major flaw in the analysis data, isn't it? I mean, can we produce our own table, or is there any point in that?
I don't think it's that simple because of the nature of where the invoices go, and it'd be quite a mammoth task for us to then dig into that granular detail that isn't always apparent.
Okay.
I just wanted to make the point that when we look at the family group comparison, we are slightly higher. Now our family group comparators are similar job density, similar rurality factors to manager. So we're actually on par with similar authorities with job density and rurality. We're actually slightly above the family group.
And also maybe coming just to say, Councillor Coyne, we were recently at a community wealth building event with Clays, and they were very impressed with the procurement in terms of management, some of the initiatives that we've done. But I'll get Derek maybe to feedback some more of that. And also, obviously we have the annual procurement report that comes up in terms of breakdown of spend, etc. as well.
Okay, Councillor Fairley.
Thanks, Chair. So we should acknowledge that there are positive results in this report, as well as ones that are still a concern. I think for me, the one on mental health, in terms of just seeing in the rank scores for that, they're all still quite concerning in terms of where we sit with that. And they're linked to drink, drugs, poverty. They all have an impact on the mental health and mental wellbeing scores. But at 2.4, we talk about work currently underway across the community planning partnership to improve signposting and awareness for the services that are available. If that campaign is run, or if that piece of work is done and it's successful, are we equipped to facilitate the need that's likely to generate? Do you have capacity to deal with what is likely to come from a successful campaign to raise awareness and signposting people to that?
I try and answer that, Councillor Rennie, and I think colleagues, both Wendy and I think Leslie Taylor, our principal educational psychologist, is in the room as well, so I can ask them just to come forward, because I think this is part of what Wendy was answering earlier. There is something about signposting people to services that are not as kind of statutory type services, and I think we've done a lot of work to try and in the space that Councillor Rennie was talking about previously, in terms of that early intervention and prevention space, particularly prevention and early intervention through the Family Wellbeing Partnership, through some of that. There are a lot of community organisations that are out there that can help people. And through Strive, we've got community connectors. We've just employed 2 more in partnership with the TSI. And they're connecting people to some of those services in the community, which means that then the commission services that we require can focus on the absolute need that they can meet. So there is something about us joining up a bit more around the whole spectrum of the services that are available. Most recently, Leslie's been leading some work for families, which is actually digital services, and the response for that. Leslie, I don't know if you want to just comment on that.
Thank you, Lorraine. Yeah, one of the reasons that for children and young people we've invested quite heavily in digital mental health services is because that allows us to provide access to mental health services at scale. So digital mental health services are never going to be the silver bullet to making sure that we can meet all the mental health needs that we've got, but they allow that universal access that kind of mops up some of the sort of young people or individuals that you were referring to earlier, Councillor Rennie, who maybe just need a little bit of support. So that allows them to access that in a way that's really flexible. There's no referral criteria. It's very sort of easy to access, it's very discreet to access. We're seeing real positives and strengths with some of our minority ethnic populations accessing digital services. So that means that the capacity is able to be maintained within these targeted face-to-face services for those that are at particular areas of need. And you refer to some of the mental health data not being heading in the right direction, but some of the stuff that is working is, if you look at the suicide rate for young people in Clackmannanshire, we are now the best in Scotland. It's one of the sort of demographics that is very flexible and open to change quite quickly, because we are looking at very small numbers, but I think that starts to evidence the impact that some of these services are having with that combination of digital and face-to-face services working as a continuum. And there's no reason why, if you're accessing a digital service, you can't also access a face-to-face service. So it allows for that personalisation and choice of how people access a mental health service.
Thank you, and I don't want to repeat some of what I've already said, but I think my colleague to the left, I think, is absolutely nailing it when you're talking about that mixture of service and support for people, whether it is because the impact, as we all know, of mental health impacts on people's physical health as well, and some of the investment we put in, as well as having those much more integrated services within the community. We've also invested in Mobilise, and we are one of the first areas in Scotland, we are the first area in Scotland who has that online support for carers 7 days a week, 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and it's telephone support, but it also helps people navigate their rights and what is available in terms of the opportunities for people to just talk about things like power of attorney, talking about adults with incapacity, and having really good, robust online information for people who I think we refer to now as the sandwich generation, who are looking after children and looking after parents at the same time. So that digital offer is really important. And we've also invested in Ask Sarah, which is about physical disability, and it's about a whole range of options in terms of people being able to access welfare rights information, from welfare rights information to the type of clothes that children and young people with disabilities need to have available to them for all sorts of complex needs. So I would offer that both of those things would be worth a look for members around the table and the wider community planning partnership, because that online offer of advice and information, we know it's right, so it's not anecdotal, it's not based on sort of community information which may or not be correct, but that alongside, as my colleague says, that face-to-face support and that work with individuals within our community in that multidisciplinary team way, along with our colleagues within education, children's services, housing. We work really closely in this space, and I think we still have work to do, but it's definitely, it feels quite different to people, certainly that I speak to who are in our communities. It feels different in terms of how we're responding to this. Thank you.
Any questions? Sorry, Councillor Glenn. Yeah.
Quickly, thanks. The corner where I caught something in 133, page 133 in the middle table, and looking at cost of training standards, environmental health and economic development. Our costs seem to be relatively low. We're scoring high in an area where we might not want to score high, because obviously if our costs are low, then our revenue is low. And I'm wondering if we're missing an opportunity here to revisit our pricing structure in some of these areas. Or is that an oversimplistic view?
Thank you, Councillor, for your chair. In terms of our cost of trade standards, the reason why it will be particularly low is because it's a shared service we have shared with Stirling Council, so they deliver on our behalf. So we actually split the cost, which makes it more favourable in terms of how the outcome is, and that's why we are shown so favourably. There's also been a period there where this trading standards team weren't fully staffed, which also made it even more favourable, shall we say. In that sense, they are now fully staffed in that sense, but which still shows positively in light of how it is spent elsewhere.
So you're confident our charges are set at about the right level?
I think there will always be an opportunity for us to try and glean more, but in terms of our cost of delivering trading standards, it's certainly quite efficient in terms of what we pay and the services we receive. In that sense.
Yeah, but coming from business background, because the cost of something is kind of irrelevant. What's its market value is what's more important. If you can buy something cheaply, it doesn't mean you should sell it cheaply.
So, Councillor, am I right in saying it's in terms of page 133 in the middle graph, because that's in terms of the cost of delivery of the service, which means that it's quite cheap to deliver in terms of what it costs the council per head of population. It doesn't necessarily, if we had additional charges in there, it would be even cheaper again, and we are ranked first in Scotland. But that is, I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarity. Your question, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's data missing, which is the revenue that's with these costs. I'm just wondering, I'm not saying that we aren't charging enough, just it would have been quite good to see the contribution as well as the cost, perhaps, for me to have a stronger argument. Okay, leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor. And I can get a rundown of what our charging income is from trading standards. That at least gives some additional context to the figures here.
Just not necessarily to sum up, but maybe to channel some of the comments that Stuart Cookmer had outlined last year when this report came up. And Lorraine's already highlighted it's a trend rather than maybe 1 year in isolation in terms of how we look at it. But Stuart also had indicated in some of the indicators with a small council, small changes the variances can be quite significant. So there's a lot of context to take in terms of the review of the performance, but I just wanted to echo Stuart's words from last year.
Thanks very much. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to read the paper. I think, again, we've got a significant level of detail, which I realise would have been a huge amount of work for all of you that are here, and I appreciate you all attending to answer questions on it as well. Obviously, we are hoping that things will have moved on significantly. We know they have at Council. We've seen lots of areas of improvement, so that's very positive. And it'll be interesting to see how things move forward. But thank you very much. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Coyne, we're open to debate. Would you like to debate? So, now, normally we would have had a break a wee while ago, but we're trying to have a split between the scrutiny part and the audit part, so we've got one paper. So we'll crack on and then we'll have a break after this next paper. So I apologise to everybody, and if anybody needs to rush off to a comfort break, don't worry, just go. But we'll move on to the staff survey, item 8, 2024, and that's going to be delivered by Sarah Langsford. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. This paper asks the committee to note the results of the 2024 staff survey and the key themes arising from it. The 2024 survey maintained indicators for staff engagement, as with previous surveys, with a focus on the themes of work, health and wellbeing and communication. Members of committee are asked to note the lower response rate compared to previous years. This did move from a 32% response rate in 2023 to 13% for 2024. Whilst this does remain statistically valid, there is a prominent skew in the responses, as you'll see, to the People Directorate, with 52% of our responses coming from this area. As such, while the views cannot be said to be fully representative of the entire council, the responses are still really useful as a snapshot of employee sentiments at the time that the survey was undertaken. If you look at the key headlines from the survey, these include overall staff engagement of 69%, which is a 2% increase on last year. However, there does continue, as I said, to be a variation of engagement across directorates, with increases in our partnership and performance and people directorates and decreases across the health and social care partnership and place areas. Staff feedback was most positive with regards to having a sense of achievement for the work that they undertake, being treated with dignity and respect, and being able to raise issues or dangers as and when they see them. However, views were more mixed in relation to feeling valued, having the tools they need to do their job effectively, accessing learning and development, and being able to work flexibly. In addition to the standardised question set, the survey also provided an opportunity for employees to allow for more general comments. So the themes for this year here focused on job security, communication, concerns around staffing levels across the council, leadership and development opportunities, and scope for cross-service collaboration and teamwork. As with previous years, it's important that we not only undertake this survey, but we also ensure we engage with staff on the results. As such, results have been shared with our trade union colleagues, and a staff trade union short life working group will be set up to further analyse these results. Actions will then be suggested, which will be included in the new strategic workforce plan for 25 to 28, which is currently in development. In addition, a full communication campaign will be undertaken to highlight results and will be really clear to employees what will happen next. Lastly, in focusing again on the lower response rate for this year, it's important that we reflect on the reasons behind this and our ongoing approach to staff engagement, with a particular focus on the survey fatigue which we feel may have been created with the annualised survey cycle. As such, the paper also seeks agreement from committee, which will require to be confirmed by council, that the survey will move to being completed every 2 years. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody get any questions? Councillor Healy, followed by Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Chair. So, in terms of the response you got, it came very close not to be valid, even statistically, never mind, just focused on the one area. And listen, I know from one trade union all outside the council, putting surveys together and trying to get a survey design and asking questions in a way that engages people sufficiently enough for you to get answers that you can take as being an accurate reflection of where staff are and answering it is difficult enough. But for it to drop to that level, and part of the feedback being that response from some of the staff is nothing happens with the outcomes of that. What is the plan to increase the response to it, first of all, in terms of the numbers who take part in the survey? And what are you, because I don't believe for a second that the council haven't responded to the stuff that comes from the survey. What's failing or what's falling down that the staff aren't believing that what they give in to the survey and responded to and been acted upon?
So as I touched on, I do think there is an element of the survey fatigue just because we have been doing it annually as well. So that is one element. In terms of the feedback specifically, we did do an internal comms campaign, and there was even a video created to show staff the outcomes. I think we have to reflect though and perhaps go even further. Perhaps we do a "you said we did" type of report back. Within 6 months, perhaps then we look at exactly what we've done. As with last year, we will take the results to Trade Union Management Group and bipartite so that we're held accountable to following through on the actions out of the survey. And I think it's just really thanking all staff for their contribution and making that clear commitment that we will take forward all feedback.
I think probably as well to add to that, I think that there's work that we need to do in our more hard to reach staff cohort. We do paper surveys and send them out, so I know in Kevin's area for particular, it's a response. So I think we need to focus maybe some of our efforts into ensuring that we get higher return rates in those areas, to hear the voices of the front line who don't maybe have access to PCs, etc., although the survey is available on mobile devices. But we seem to have consistently over the years have very poor response from those kind of areas of the workforce. So I think we need to look at how we can better engage those workforce.
Councillor Coyne.
Well, it's kind of a follow-up to that. Would it be useful, do you think, to, at the beginning of the survey process, to actually give a reason immediately why you should complete the survey? One reason might be because last time we did a survey, the results were blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that's one reason. Second is that 10% of you will receive a £5 M&S voucher. Lucky voucher. Just something to engage them in the process, sweeten the pill, as it were, because sometimes, I get a lot of these things through the post surveys about this, that, and the next thing, and you just sort of immediately you get fatigued with the idea of going, oh, 5 minutes of boredom. So, but if there's a carrot at the end of it, and I believe in the survey, having been, the justification being that the last survey we did brought out these results, sell the thing. use some marketing techniques on it.
Yeah, I think just on the back of that, you mentioned there that you said we did. I think that for our committee, obviously this is a really significant area that staff satisfaction. And I think for our committee, it'd be useful to see some of the results of the we did as well, maybe in about 6 months' time, if that would be possible.
Yes, that's certainly something we can bring forward. I think obviously in terms of incentivising staff, we are quite limited financially, that side of it, of what we could offer. I think perhaps we could be a bit more innovative. Like you say, we'll think about our comms and our marketing ahead of the survey. We do really strongly try and encourage managers to give all employees the time and space in work time to complete it. Perhaps we can make more of a thing of that, create spaces for a specific time for people to do it. We can work with directors, Kevin with Place, to see what would work for your directorate, and then we can certainly take that forward.
Questionnaire coffee club.
Great ideas. Okay, any other questions? No. Well, thanks very much, and thanks for the offer to come back and feedback on the survey. So again, just happy to move. I mean, I'm saying happy to move. Obviously, it would do much better if it had more significant results. But move the paper, David, to second the paper, Councillor Fairley. Open to debate.
So we're going to second the paper, Chair, just to say that I'm happy to second it, but I actually agree with the moving to the biannual survey. I do think you do get survey fatigue doing it every year, and actually from the council's point of view, asking staff to do that every year gives them very little time to then deliver the results from the stuff that comes from it. So I think it's a double-edged sword by keeping asking the same questions year on year and not giving yourself the time to then properly address the stuff that comes from it. So I think moving to biannual is the right thing to do. I do think there is a thing about some of the council staff. It will be difficult for them, even although the provision there is, you can access it during work time, given some of the roles that some of the staff provide for the council. That's difficult for them to do that. So maybe we need to look at how we give access to some of the harder to reach groups that you made reference to, Chris, but happy to second the paper.
No, I agree with you. I think biannually, from my point of view, I think this makes sense. I think people do get survey fatigue, and then they just think, oh, again, and you've not got time to show the way you've actioned it. So I agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else like to debate the paper? Councillor Coyne.
I would just endorse what Councillor Fairley said, and you said yourself. I think 2 years gives enough time to actually produce some positive results from the last one, and it helps the selling proposition. So absolutely, biannual.
So are we in agreement? So obviously we're noting the paper. Are we happy to note the paper? And we're in agreement on point 2.2 to agree to biannual? Yep. Okay, thanks very much. Right, we'll take a well-earned break now, folks, to go on to audit next. Yeah, actually, my suggestion with my colleague here is to make it a lunch break, which actually makes perfect sense, so we can all get a bit of refreshment and come back. So what time did you say, Chris? 1:45. You're getting a real good break, so you're refreshed for audit. You want to be refreshed for audit.